Hello everyone, my name is Cokart and welcome back to another video. I hope you guys are all doing well, and in today's video we're going to be talking or reviewing my latest and greatest investment. This is the Canon 77D DSLR camera, and it's equipped with two lenses. Well, once I purchased them. One kit lens and one extra. I'm going to show you a little bit around the camera and tell you about some of its unique features that can be quite useful to a YouTuber, and also tell you why I got two lenses instead of just one. And finally, I also want to show you what shooting raw photography can do to up your photography game. But please remember that this is a YouTuber's perspective and not an in-depth review. There are plenty of photographers out there that can give you a in-depth review of the inner workings of this camera, but I'm just getting started in the world of photography, so please bear that in mind. Okay, so now we've switched to the new camera, and how do you think it looks? I think it looks pretty great. The only thing that doesn't look so great is the framing. So right now I'm all the way in the back of my room. The camera's on the opposite side of the room, and it can only get about this much of me in frame, which is nowhere near enough. But this is easily solved, because the only thing that I will ever need to do is move this set to the attic. But right now that's not possible because there is no light there at all. I mean, there's one ceiling light and it's pretty weak. So when I get my studio set coming in that I have my eyes on, as you can see on screen now, that's the thing I'm gonna be trying to aim for. It has some lights included, it has 3-4 backdrops from what I remember, and well, that's gonna really transform the videos as a whole. But until I get those lights, I cannot shoot up there. So far you'll just have to do with my room, which is gonna result into some shitty framing unless I, of course, use the 50mm lens to get a more wider shot. But personally, I think this is a lot more personal and up close, and I think it would make a lot more interesting content. I mean, I got the lens right, I gotta use it. To get to the point, what I wanted to start with, what was I initially looking for when purchasing a camera? So when I first started looking for cameras, I wanted a few things. One was I needed an articulating screen. Basically meaning I wanted a screen that I could look at from up top, down low, or the opposite way. So just like I'm doing right now with this video, I can look at the screen and I can see at what part of the frame I am to like go nowhere beyond the borders of this frame. Another thing that I wanted was it needed to shoot 1080p at least 60 frames per second, because well, I can either try and create some 60 frames per second content, but then I thought of something more realistic, and that's slow motion. So shooting 30 frames per second videos, and then when I needed to do something slow motion, shoot it in 60 frames per second and just slow it twice the speed, which is what I intend to use it for on an upcoming video once the weather goes around. Then it also needed to have an easy to use interface. So an easy to use interface was pretty much, well, at no point found except for with Canon. I looked at the Nikon, but it was a little bit cluttered with dials and such, whereas Canon basically gave you a readout of what the hell that thing was, and you could change it on a whim with a touchscreen. I thought with the Nikon it was a bit too cluttered. I mean, you could change the style, but I think it was still a bit too cluttered for me personally, so I went with the Canon. And then it also needed to have an optical viewfinder. Some cameras use an electronic viewfinder, which can cause lag in low light situations. It basically is a little screen in the viewfinder location that you would find on a DSLR camera, except on a DSLR camera it's optical. What you see through that viewfinder is what the lens is actually seeing and looking at. Whereas with with an electronic viewfinder, what you see is what you get, but it can lag, it can be well, not as smooth of an experience. So I needed one with an optical viewfinder because lag is not something I want in my games, PC, or whatever else in my life. Lag is unacceptable. So on top of that, I needed a camera with a solid battery life. So I needed something that had a cheap, expandable battery storage. So Canon right now is, as far as I think, from what I've read, I've not actually looked it up and I probably should, is that Canon's batteries are pretty cheap. They're not as big as the Nikon batteries, although they're bigger in physical size, they're not bigger in capacity, but the Canon just had cheaper batteries. So eventually I went with the Canon, but ultimately battery life was not the main factor why I decided to get a Canon, but more about that later. And on top of all of that, the camera had to be low, 1,000 euros. Anything above that and I would not accept it. Then finding a camera that can do all of those things was very hard. I was torn between the Canon 77D on one side and on the other side the Nikon D5600. They were both solid cameras, but there are a few reasons you would want to pick the Canon above the Nikon when shooting video. And that's because of Canon's dual pixel AF autofocus, which is like years ahead of Nikon's autofocus. It basically allows for some very, very smooth autofocus when shooting video. Also for photography, it autofocuses really fast and it has a very good prediction system of what to autofocus on. But if you don't like that, you can totally like pick a point on the screen and autofocus on it yourself. On top of that, the Canon had way more autofocus points. It actually had, so the Nikon had 39 autofocus points, of which 19 were cross points, whereas with the Canon there were 45 autofocus points, of which all were cross type, which is really good for autofocusing. And on top of that, that dual pixel AF is a game changer. So simply when you're shooting video, you should already consider Canon or Sony, because both are really good at the autofocusing game, whereas Nikon is a little bit laying behind in that department. Oh, and just before people start to go and yell like, why don't you go with a mirrorless camera? It's because mirrorless cameras have those electronic viewfinders that lag so much. Mirrorless cameras also have way less battery life because, well, they're more compact and they're easy to carry, but have the capabilities of a proper DSLR thick camera. It doesn't have that space anymore for the big batteries, so battery life is worse. And of course that electronic viewfinder, which on some models is done really well, like the newer Sony A7 series, which are doing reasonably well in low light with the electronic viewfinder, but things like well, most mirrorless cameras still suck in that department. So yes, mirrorless cameras, I know of the existence and I know that they're really good right now, but for what I wanted something more pure, mechanical and authentic, so I opted to get the DSLR.
Also forgot to mention that it's a lot cheaper.
So when I finally picked my camera, out of a few dozen or so, I had to decide what type of content I would be shooting. Because depending on what you're going to be shooting or photographing, you might want to swap out your lens, because your lens can completely redefine the way you shoot video or photography. So because I was on a tight budget, I wanted one lens and it had to be the right one. But the perfect lens doesn't exist. Unfortunately, the only lens that was suited for my needs and was affordable wasn't good enough on its own. It was perfect for low light, it was perfect for fast shutter speed action, and it was perfect for portraits and close-ups. I'm talking about the Canon f1.8 50mm STM or stepping motor lens. And it's just the perfect portrait lens for any beginner using a Canon camera. and it comes in at 119 euros, which is very cheap. But this lens doesn't feature any stabilization, unlike the kit lens. And it was way too cropped as well. For architecture photography, when I wanted to take a photo, I had to go like way back in order to take that entire building into frame, which this lens right now is not really good at, but the kit lens, as I'll show you in a second, is really good at it. And now to give you an idea of how cropped that sensor really is, this one, you're now looking through the kit lens, which as you can see is much wider. I can stretch out my arms and I'm still in frame, which simply wasn't possible with this lens. It was only possible through this lens. But that doesn't mean that this lens is bad. I mean, this lens is awesome. It's just not meant for certain shooting situations. But one thing I could definitely see this lens being used for is for, well, wildlife photography in some situations. I'm talking about let's say a butterfly. Butterfly flies away when you get too close. So because this lens zooms in a little bit, it's actually pretty good for that. You can actually get some really close-up and vibrant shots from a comfortable position without it flying off because it's scared of you. It's actually the perfect distance for that, and it's actually one of the best lenses you could use for such a situation. And other than that, this is the perfect portrait lens, because right now, in order for me to blur this background, I would need to get so close, and it's not even that blurred. Sorry, I keep looking at the screen. I'll get used to it eventually. But yes, for this video, we're just gonna be switching back to this lens because I like this lens a little more. So since I have both lenses now, I'm actually suited for quite a lot of situations simply by buying one lens. But I've kind of spent enough money for the year, so I'm gonna try and tone it down a little. But you know what? It's okay, it's alright. I'm happy to spend it. And it's because of you guys. Because of you, I get the motivation to go and keep going. And I really want to give a special thanks to Jacqueline from Nothing But Tech 88. I'll link her channel in the description down below. You should definitely check her out. 16-year-old female tech YouTuber. I mean, those are 3 words you'll not hear very often. So definitely go check her out. She's an awesome content creator, and she recently moved into her new studio. And yeah, I know, right? 16-year-old with her own studio. What have I done with my life, you know? And also a special thanks to Dark Fallen Angel, who has been supporting me on my channel from the beginning and really has tried hard to convince me that I'm a good content creator. Jacqueline too said I was a talented content creator. It surprised me greatly, but it definitely pushed me over the edge to go and invest more into this channel by purchasing a camera such as that. Okay, so right now I've told you about why I got the lenses, why I got the camera and all that stuff. So let's show you some bokeh-licious photos and stabilized video.
Yes, I did. For love, yes, I did it all for love. Oh, they say fools believe in it, so I guess I'm one of them. Oh, don't you know? I fell for fools gold. I fell for fools gold. What did I know? What did I know? I
Now, and some other key features of the camera is flicker reduction. So if you're shooting pictures where there is lights that flicker a lot, like TL tubes, then the camera will adjust itself so that it will shoot whenever it's not flickering. This can reduce shutter speed, but it will allow you to get a flicker-free shot. It also has time-lapse built in, and of course the electronic image stabilization and in-body stabilization. So those are some really nice features built into this camera. And overall, I'm very happy with this purchase, and I hope it will help me create some better and higher quality content for you guys. There will be more investments when the money arrives, but for now I've spent enough. And the only real downside on this camera, yes, there's only one, it can't shoot video in RAW. But you know, money doesn't grow on trees. One day, first gotta earn my shooting abilities, and if I think that I can take all that raw footage, then I'll be sure to use it. But for now, training camera under $1,000. So this is my YouTuber's perspective on the Canon 77D. Let me know what you think. If you feel like I've left something out or you have any more questions about the camera, please don't hesitate to ask me in the comments, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of this type of content with the new gear and see where this YouTube channel is going. And I got some collaborations coming up actually with a YouTube channel called 2 Minute Tech. You should definitely check him out as well. Leave a link in the description below. I'm going to try and do some type of collaboration with him reasonably soon. But like I said, I'm working, so we'll see how that ends up going. And also follow me on Instagram, where I'll be posting most of my news. Alternatively, you can follow me on Twitter, or join our Discord community to meet some more of those technological and gaming humans.